So I'm going to tell you three things. What the college is, the political crisis we face, and how those two things are related. There's some prospective students here tonight and some new people, so first I'll tell you briefly what the college is. It's a very old-fashioned thing, and the fact that we've lost sight of what it is a sign of the times. It's a liberal arts college, and we think today that that means studying a whole bunch of different stuff. It doesn't. It means answering a certain question. I asked that question of two prospective students, both bright, smart, good-looking, tonight, and one of them gave me the usual answer. I said, what is the most important thing to learn? And he said, well, that's a question. He's a bold young man, by the way. I think he's a dog that will hunt, as we say at Hillsdale, because he was so confident in saying, that's a question that cannot be answered. And I pointed out to him, that you've placed yourself in the logical position of proving a negative. It means you actually have to know everything to say that it cannot be answered. But in fact, it can be answered. The answer is found in the first book of Plato's Republic, for example, in one of my favorite conversations I've ever read, and one of the oldest conversations ever recorded. This ambitious young man, having watched the dialogue go on for a while, his name was Glaucon, and he's like a kid that would go to Hillsdale College, or he's like most any of us were when we were young and full of beans. And he erupted in the conversation. I see the old ball player artist Sprankle over there. James Sprankle, his boy, who graduated from Hillsdale College not long ago, he's exactly this kind of kid. Cheeky and ambitious and wishing to know and get the answer. And this guy Glaucon intervenes with Socrates and he says, then show me, he says, Socrates, that I should not steal, even if I want the thing to steal. And even if I know that if I steal it, I will not get caught, and everyone will think me an honest man. And I know further that if I don't steal it, I will be suspected of stealing it, and everybody will blame me for dishonesty. Show me, he said, that justice is good for its own sake. That's how, as you know, Plato's Republic is one of the few greatest books ever written. It is a wonder to read at any time in your life. And it starts with that urgent thing. And of course, on the one hand, that's the most elevated question. And on the other hand, it's the most immediate and constant question with which our consciences are pricked every day. Because it is the nature of the human being that we are necessitous creatures, needing things all the time. Should we steal to get them? What wrong might we commit in our own interest because our interest presses us every day? If we do not eat every few hours, we will begin to starve. And if we do not sleep in comfort every night, we will soon become dysfunctional. And in that respect, we're like every animal. And yet, in another respect, and this is a magical thing, especially when you think of it placed in the context in which it is. In a magical thing, something in us stands outside that need. And that is the voice of our conscience correcting us all the time. And so Aristotle, the student of Socrates and Plato, can say that the good is the thing which calls us most strongly. And the process of becoming good is the process of becoming a happy human being and an educated human being. And so the most urgent question is the question of the nature of the good. How shall we act? And it is both for us the ultimate question, and it is the highest question. And I promise you, if you go look at the founding document of any college founded more than 100 years ago, and you will not find any, I promise, that does not have at the center of its mission that question of the good. All of them do. Ours says, the denomination of Christians known as Free Will Baptists, along with other friends of education, grateful to God for the prevalence in the land of the inestimable blessings of civil and religious freedom and intelligent piety. Civil and religious freedom, that's America's gift to the world, you see. Never achieved anywhere on the face of the earth until this country. Grateful to God we are for that. And the value of the blessing is beyond any estimating. And we say in the document that sound learning is necessary to preserve this blessing. And we say that this sound learning will set up the conditions to improve the heart, that is to say, the moral virtues, and develop the mind of every student. That is what we do at our college. And we don't do anything else. And if you want to come to our college, you should come to do that. And you will sign a pledge before you come. We call it our honor code, and it says that you will do that. And if you won't sign that pledge, we will not let you in. And it doesn't make any difference who you are. And every college in the land, until about 75 years ago, was run that way. And how are they run today? Do you know what AP courses are? You take them in high school, especially fancy suburban high schools. And they give you college credit, and they help you get admitted to college. And there's a standard curriculum, and there's a series of examinations at the end of them. And they're pretty hard, and as things go, in high school these days, they're, pretty good. And if you go, you can buy it from Amazon, or I will send you the relevant paragraph that I'm about to quote from. It costs $9.99 at Amazon. The Current Teacher's Guide for English Literature of the AP course, which remember the power of that thing, right? It's done by the College Board, which is some testing organization, big, powerful deal. And kids all over the country take it. And this is what they tell the teachers about teaching the course. This introductory essay is written by an English professor at Agnes Scott College in Georgia. Lively writer. She must be really smart. Of the teaching of English literature, she says, objectivity and factuality are out the door. Today, we teach students to find their own reality in the text, no doubt hoping, which is, by the way, a dangling participle. No doubt hoping that they will find values to guide them through a mad, mad world. What is the answer to the question, show me, Socrates, that I ought not steal? The answer is, find your own values. And it deprives the student of the reason to read the book. We have a Shakespeare teacher at our college. He's wonderful. And I sat in one of his classes one time. I wanted to kiss him in the middle of it. And he's not even good looking. And he comes in, and he holds up this book. He's kind of an aw shucks guy. He's from Texas, I think. And he says, we're going to read this book. He said, have you read this book? And he's holding up a bunch of Shakespeare plays in a bound volume. And some of them yes, and some of them no. And he says to them, boy, how fortunate we are. He says, because for those of you who worked on this, we can go deeper into this marvelous thing. And for those of you who have not, you get to meet this man. And no one ever wrote like this man. It is marvelous. You see? Now, the hard work of figuring out why it's marvelous, the hard work of finding the truth that is hidden in it, Do you want to know Shakespeare's description of a mother's love? I saw it in King John in a play one time. It's one of the most effective things. I nearly fell over. It was so powerful. The mother of Arthur, the boy who is one of the claimants for the English throne, is grieving that her boy has been killed in a dynastic contest. And she is grieving to the King of France, who's involved there, you see. And she keeps going on about the loss of her son. And to her, it's not the future king, it's her son. And the king says, "Madam, I believe you love your grief as much as you loved your boy." And she replies to him, and I can remember the look on the face of this actress when she said these words, and the look was compelled by the strength of the words. She said, "I do. My grief sleeps in the bed where he lay, and it lives in the closet where his clothes were. It is what I have now, because my boy is gone." And if you live in the age when you think by an act of legislation by a bunch of ignorant congressmen, you can change the nature of the family, then read that play and feel the power of those words. And read your Aristotle, where it says that the free soul of the human being is a complex thing, because after all, it is stuck in this body that has these needs, and it does take so long to grow up. And the fact that children of human beings require so much care means that none of us grows up without an act of charity that lasts for at least 2 decades. And without that, none of us could live. And so, if you don't get your education because you have been deprived of the reason to get it, you might not know the things that are as plain as the nose on your face. And we live in a time like that. And so you kids, if you come to our college, get your boots on. It will be difficult, and it will be wonderful. This connects to the crisis in our country. Something important has changed in education, and something important has changed in our politics. And these two things, it just so happens, are parallel, exactly and precisely parallel. I just gave you a contrast between Plato's Republic and Aristotle's Ethics on the one hand, and the AP Guide for English Literature on the other, to compare the sublime and the ridiculous. Do it again. Compare them again. When's the last time you read the Declaration of Independence? Start at the end. It's fun back there. He mentions at the end the supreme judge of the world. The whole tone of the Declaration, by the way, which is an act of treason, you know. And it carries death. Some of them suffered it. So many of them lost their property. At the end, they submit their case after reading this beautiful document. And you know, Thomas Jefferson could really write. And they submit to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of their intentions. See, justice language. Justice is real. It's the justice that said that you, king, however well born you are, may not take our property, because it is ours, and we are entitled to it. And we will no more let you take ours than we will try to take yours. Because all men are created equal, it says. And then it says, because they know the gravity of the act they are committing, that they say at the last sentence, in support of this declaration, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now see, that is an answer to Glaucon's question from the Republic. No matter what, we will not abandon the words that we have written down there. No interest of ours. And you can summarize every interest it is possible for you to have in the list of your lives and your fortunes and your sacred honor. One of them was a farmer in Philadelphia, just outside, and Philadelphia is near the sea. And he said to his wife the night before he went to sign the document, he said, "Madam," he said, "tomorrow we're going to declare our independence." And she said, "Yes." And he said, "And I am going to put my name on the document." And she said, "Yes." And she said, "We do live here near the sea, and they have the control of it." And he said, "Yes." And he said, "They are going to take our farm." And she said, "Well, then find us somewhere to go." So you see, they knew what they meant. And it's because of that grave thing that comes at the end that you can judge the initial words, which are, of course, among the greatest and the most famous political words ever written. But by the way, ask an 18-year-old somewhere today to tell you where these words come from. When in the course of human events, which doesn't mean here in 1776, understand. It means any time it becomes necessary for one people, which doesn't mean these people who at the end are swearing their lives for the cause. It means any people. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them. Isn't that a beautiful expression? And you kids, if you come to our college, I will ask you to define for me the laws of nature and of nature's God. And when you tell me that it's impossible to say such things, I will shame you. And then when you venture your first answer and your second and your third and your fourth, and we give you more things to read, and then by the time you're a junior, you will begin to speak on that subject the way Jefferson did. And you will know a joy that is very great. To extend the principle from the Declaration, Madison is explaining why the Constitution has its structure in the 51st Federalist paper. And he says in there, my favorite part of that wonderful book, he says, "What is government but the profoundest of all commentaries on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither internal nor external controls on the government would be needed." In other words, there's an order of nature. And at the top are angels and God, and in the middle are men. And Jefferson, writing about the Declaration, he died, exactly on its 50th anniversary, of course. And a few days before, he wrote his last letter in his life to explain it. And he said, "It only means some men are not born with saddles on their backs, nor others booted and spurred to ride them by the grace of God. Angels, men, horses. And in the order of nature, we are all equal and have our rights." Obama writes, "Implicit in the Constitution's structure, in the very idea of ordered liberty, was a rejection of absolute truth." Can you believe that? God help us. What happened in the American Revolution, except a bunch of people, by the way, with property and stuff at stake, decided to commit treason against the most powerful man on earth? And what did they do except stop, as Lincoln said, all honor to Jefferson, who had the forecast to place in a merely, Obama claims to be a follower of Lincoln. All honor to Jefferson, who had the forecast to place in a merely revolutionary document an abstract truth applicable to all men and all times. What a statement of utter illiteracy. And it continues. Implicit in the Constitution's structure, in the very idea of ordered liberty, was a rejection of absolute truth, the infallibility of any ideology or theology or ism that might lock future generations into an unalterable course. This is in the audacity of hope. In other words, a book written in the course of seeking power, and with the statement that there is no absolute that should restrain its use. We have in this country right now a regulatory czar. Do you know what a czar is? The greatest law ever passed in America, I think, is, apart from the Constitution and maybe the Northwest Ordinance, is the Homestead Act. It is, by the way, a very complicated document. It settles the question of the Western land and organizes for its transfer to private parties, whoever they may be, none of them ever able to vote for anybody in Congress or against him at that time, if they will just work on the land for 5 years. And it is so complex that it is 4 pages long. And it is glorious. It is beautiful. Lincoln signed it in 1862. It's one of the greatest pieces of legislation in the whole course of human history. By the way, that's how I think we should pay off the federal debt. We should sell land and government assets because they will do better in the private sector, and we have a precedent for it. But I mention this because what was the law of property under the Tsar at the time that the Homestead Act was passed? The law was that you could only get any property if the Tsar gave it to you, and you could keep it so long as he let you keep it, and you owed all of the produce from it and all of your service to him at his whim whenever. Right? So Tsardom is the opposite of the phenomenon of American government. And what it produces is serfs and vassals. And not, by the way, people like us. I am the son of a school teacher from a little town in Arkansas. And I grew up taught that I could do anything that I'd work hard enough to do. That is the opposite of czardom. And the regulatory czar, whom I happen to know, is a shameful human being. Writes in a book, I do mean to say that at a minimum, what seems to be government regulation of speech might in some circumstances actually promote speech. Freedom of speech, words about politics can in principle be controlled because there is no such thing as an absolute truth. And that means that the distinction between men and horses diminishes. And why, by the way? Is it not the doctrine that this old-fashioned, awkward idea of nature is passé now, as Woodrow Wilson said? The Declaration of Independence is obsolete. I didn't even say this. He wrote it in congressional government. You can look it up. The Declaration of Independence is obsolete. It is answerable to a time accountable to Newton. But now we have Darwin, and we know that societies are living and changing things, and so must be their governments. And so, of course, then, your rights under your nature are changeable things. In 2003, on NPR, interviewed, for goodness sake, for the record, you can listen to it on the internet, Senator Obama was asked, what are we going to do about this awkward Supreme Court that won't let us do anything? And he replied, it's kind of cool what he said. He said, the Supreme Court is not really the place. He said, because the founders put these provisions in the Constitution that make it difficult for us to do things that we need to do, like redistribution of wealth. And so we can only achieve those things through community organizing. Now, by the way, the guy has since taken an oath prescribed in so many words in the Constitution to uphold the Constitution of the United States and defend it against all its enemies. And I wonder, and somebody should ask him, not about where he was born, because you can't settle that question. They should ask him, what is the status of that oath? So I'll state for you the strategic situation briefly, and I'll be done. Elite and highly trained people, intellectuals mostly, have as a group rejected the principles of the founding of our country. They are now regarded as obsolete. And remember this point, by the way, the claim when they were written is that they are eternal. And so if they're obsolete now, they were not true then. And if they are true now, they are not then, if they were true then, they are not obsolete now. And that means, by the way, that you have to choose. You can't have both. They are mutually exclusive, and you must figure out which one you want. By purposeful act, a movement has been set in train over decades. Not a conspiracy, it's open. And it's not evil in its own mind. Remember, I've not called anybody that. Well, I did say something bad about Cass Sunstein. But I withdraw it. I don't mean that. He's not a bad man. He is so very ill-directed. He's the regulatory czar. And their idea is to overcome the awkward limits on the government so that at last we can all be a tight community and set everything right and all live really equally in the way that is, by the way, impossible for us. That's what's going on, and it has progressed to a point where it amounts to an acuteness now because trillions change hands and people are marching. Did you see the advertisement that Scott Brown ran the last week? My heart just jumped. It starts out something like this. It looks like that video, by the way, and I know how that video came to be. I've been studying the stuff I'm talking about for 30 years. And maybe I'm crazy, but I come by it honest. I thought about it a long time. And I'm open about it too, right? And I do read the founding document of Hillsdale College to be precisely in conformity with the views that I hold today, else I would not be entitled to be its head. And I do believe that I believe and understand the precise prescriptions of the Declaration of Independence, else I would not be fit to address my fellow citizens on questions of public concern. And these people, by their own words, have set out to alter all that. And sometimes they pretend it is only a completion or an evolution or an evolvement of what happened before. But I'm saying to you, they are mutually exclusive and you have to choose. And what will come if we choose the new way is that we will learn to live under masters. No doubt, meaning good, but they are human and they have their needs. And the doctrine of the revolution was you would give that power to angels alone. That is the first fact before us today. And the second is this. It has always been true of our country that if our people ever go bad, that is to say, if they ever adopt principles different from those of the revolution, then we are finished because they are set up to be the ultimate guardians of the Constitution. And if you look at events today, it looks like maybe they have not done that. And then the third thing follows. They remain a people worthy of an informed and educated leadership. And they have not had it because the people who govern us, by and large, with a few noble exceptions, have not read the books and thought the thoughts that the founders thought it necessary to read and think to be fit to lead in the United States of America. And that brings me to my conclusion, and that is that I am in the teaching business, and I am going to teach every student at Hillsdale College with my colleagues and every citizen who will listen. And now through our Kirby Center, every statesman who will listen, the things they need to know. And that process, carried on by me and my colleagues and others, will be today, as it has been in the past, the salvation of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arnn. We have a few moments, and Dr. Arnn has agreed to answer a few questions. We do have a couple of microphones in the room. Because we are taping this, we'd like to get your questions over a microphone. So if you, once you're chosen to ask a question, if you'd please wait for the mic.
Anybody or nobody? I could pick out one of these young people and make them do it.
You mentioned a last ad by Scott Brown, but then, which I must have missed. I didn't see it, and you were going to describe it.
Oh, I was going to describe it.
But then I
thought I didn't have time, but I thought about trying to play it for you. It starts out with a picture of some revolutionary battles. And it says, the first line, if I remember it right, Ed Raish is here. He's one of my educators. He follows the news. You've seen it? Have you seen it? I think it starts out, there's a picture of a Revolutionary War battle, and it says, the first line is, Massachusetts has always been in the front line. You know, and it's really true. I mean, you know about the siege of Boston and all that? I mean, the war broke out in Boston. And one of the reasons they picked George Washington, I thank God they did, and one of the reasons they did was he was so beautiful and had a war record. But the other reason was he wasn't from Massachusetts. And they need, you know, Virginia was a real big state down the way, and they thought, we got to get everybody on our side here. If one of us, John Hancock, wanted it. So the point is, that's where the revolution started. And you know the first motto, have you seen the flag with the broken snake? Don't tread on me, And you know the story of the letter from the king to the American people? He was such a doofus. There are two really great stories about this. One is by the way, everybody wanted to get along. If you read the documents in the progress to the Declaration of Independence, they are a process of people being persuaded one by one, because they wanted to get along with the king. And they were very slow to say they weren't loyal to him. So at one point they sent Franklin over there, who was a deal maker. He was kind of a rascal who wrote moral homilies. And he was really quite a guy. And they sent him over there because he was one who really wanted to get along, and they thought he can patch this up. And he gets over there and he sits down with Grenville. And Grenville, who was, a silly goose of a guy, and he just never been over here, right? And he said, you are the children, and we are the mother country. You have to do what we say. And Franklin goes to his room that night and writes his first letter back, and he says, there's going to be a war. Because we're not going to do that, right? See? So the point is, that's the spirit of Boston. And then and it describes it in 3 or 4 frames with some really handsome words. And then at the end, Obama comes on. And I don't think he's called King George, but he's pictured that way. And this, for God's sake, this is Massachusetts, which apparently still lives.
In the last sentence of what you concluded your address with, you said these things will be the and I'm not going to find the right words, the salvation of our country.
I did say that.
Okay? And my immediate thought was, do you mean they will be, or they are the only possible solution?
They will be,
You think it will really
Sure.
change back to a constitutional government and
of course.
be accepted?
Yes.
Wonderful. Let's applaud.
Yes, certainly. Did you ever read much Winston Churchill? Do you know how he knew we were going to conquer the Germans in 1940 when they had 200 and some divisions and the British had 6 without their equipment? And the Germans started the Battle of Britain with air superiority and the British were alone and the Soviets were on the side of the Germans. He calculated it all up and he said, and when we have conquered, as conquer we shall, for conquer we must.
Hillsdale has done a wonderful job of expanding the knowledge of the school and its mission throughout the country through Imprimis. But have there been any other connections to be able to expand to young people? I'm sure that if you were to look at the average age, in fact, maybe you're going to dispute this, of the people who subscribe or who receive the publication, they are older people. How can you get satellites, if you will, of Hillsdale College throughout the country without having difficulty with the government and all of the things that come along with that?
Thank you. Well, difficulty with our government is our middle name, so I don't know we can get rid of that. But I guess I'll say 2 kinds of answers to that. One is, remember, I actually believe that ordinary people get their educations from their jobs and their families and their churches and their stuff. And the stuff that they teach in college today, remember, they begin with an invitation not to learn it. Because they tell you in the end the truth is just inside you and doesn't have any correspondence to anything outside. And you know, kids are pretty cynical and pretty quick, I find, especially if you tell them stuff like that. So I don't think that many people are ruined by college so far. They're more ignorant than they should be, but it's a notorious fact that the students in a college are more sensible than their professors, mostly. So I don't think that the thing that we're lacking is a mass movement exactly. I'll give another example. I don't think few finer people than George W. Bush have ever been elected president. But I think it's just a recorded fact that in about the middle 20 years of his life, he didn't read anything. And it seemed like that was true. You know, good guy. But when you're at that level, making judgments, I don't think he ever fully figured out what the problem was. You know, and remember, it's a gross fact, but a lot of gross facts are not visible until you study a bit. The government of the United States has a different shape than it used to have. And that has happened pretty recently. Why did that happen? You could say it happened by the evolution of the economy, but I think that's nonsense. Why? Because, you know, I think the guy who used to run Westinghouse is here tonight, right? And he's a real smart guy. I talked to him for a while. And I'll bet you if we ask him, he will tell you that the key to his success was that he figured out how to push authority down alongside responsibility to the lowest levels. I know that's how I run our college. And our costs have been going up slower than the rate of inflation for a decade now. That's mostly because, you know, one time the accreditor said, "How have you done that?" And I said, "I didn't." And she said, "Who did it?" And I said, "Everybody did it." And they said, How'd you get them to do it?" And I said, "I asked them." You know? And I knew, you know, I worked at it a lot. I tried to figure out how to ask them. But, you know, most of the things that I learned in my life at Hillsdale College, you know, I know a huge amount about 19-year-olds. I really know a lot about that. You know how I know? They told me. And sometimes they don't really fully realize what they're telling you. So the point is, this idea of centralized bureaucratic government with complex, unreadable rules written at the top, that's not the spirit of anything else in our country today except the government. And so I think it's been adopted for some other reason than because that's how things are going. I think there's a principle at work. The idea is this independence and separation in the American government is the cause of so much evil. And so Woodrow Wilson wrote in these words, we have to find tools to marry the interest of the individual to the interest of the state. And I don't think it's any accident that it's written in that health care bill that 60% of us are going to get transfer payments. And by the way, if you can't do arithmetic, I will explain. They're not going to be net gainers. You see? So the point is, I don't think George Bush knew that. And so I think leadership is partly a gift of genius. And I can't do that. I've studied Winston Churchill all my life. Gosh, what a phenomenon he was. You just never meet anybody like that. He's too great. And I can't produce that, but what we can do is we can produce very highly educated and dutiful people in sufficient numbers to make a difference. And then, we're going to start pretty soon a request for, so I'll answer one more thing. A request for proposals is about to go out from Hillsdale College to 3 states where they have really good charter school laws. And the request for proposals will say that if you will form a charter yourselves and receive the obligations of that, and if we reach an agreement, we will do something for you. We will hire and pay your headmaster for 7 years, and we will provide you a curriculum, and we will train all your teachers. And I think we might be good at that because that's the business we're in. We have a high school already, and I learned by screwing it up how to run it. And I think that if we do that, and we're going to do that pretty soon, and we might do that on some substantial scale. It might be with many of them. And I think then that's a more of a mass impact. And we're having a constitutional town hall on January 30th. There's probably something out there about it. And 100 people are going to get in a room, and some of us are going to blow off to them. But you can watch it on the internet if you sign up. So far, 11,000. So that's pretty good. And Imprimis is $1.8 million, and I can't stop it growing. I can't keep my budget. The only thing in my budget growing is Imprimis, and it's going wild. And we find a way to afford it. So there's your answer. And remember, everyone in this room is a cause of action in nature. None of us is a horse. And that means there's just no estimating what we can do. Look at Massachusetts. So I see, okay, we'll try to, how are we doing? You guys want to go? We'll ask a few more and then we'll shut up. 2 more, John says.
Thank you, sir, for your unabashed truth. The thing I fear most is those that want to have a constitutional convention.
Yeah,
What do you say to those? I know that a man named Tugwell worked for Roosevelt and went a lot further left than he liked. He left the government and he actually wrote a constitution to propose to the United States. Not many people know that.
Did you hear that? I'm against a constitutional convention. And the reason is the old one was so good. And I could see it might work if you excluded anybody who had a PhD or had ever met anybody with, But in general, by the way, the idea is get the old one back. And I always oppose constitutional amendments except for 2. I would repeal the 16th and 17th Amendments. So I agree with you. That's the wrong direction. This one is the best one ever done, proven over and over again. Love that and recover it. And I even believe, I'll tell you one little thing. In 1854, the Republican Party had its first convention and published its first platform document. And it's a very beautiful document because it teaches the anti-slavery movement that you can't abolish slavery except by constitutional means. And it proposes the means. And the means is we won't touch it in the states where it exists, but we will forbid it to go any further into any federal territory. And that was, at that time, most of the land. And that's the platform that Lincoln later ran on. And that platform was written in Jackson, Michigan by 12 people, and 2 of them, it does just so happen, worked at Hillsdale College. So we, are going to write another one, just like it, about a constitutional model platform political party, and we're going to publish that pretty soon. And that seems to me a way to go. Work your way back to the good one, not try to make up another one. Okay, so this one and then one more.
I just have a quick question about your philosophy about who you choose to be speakers, whether they be for the imprimis or other speakers at your school. I happen to have gone to one of those Ivy League schools that we don't like to talk about anymore in our household. My husband went to another one, and I just met another Ivy Leaguer in my row, and he doesn't seem to be too thrilled about his school. And one of our big complaints about the school is they never have diversity of their speakers. There's always very one-sided. Our son went to a New England college, and he did a poll, and he realized that there were only 4 Republican professors among the 465, I don't know how many there were, but anyway, there were very few. And I thought, okay, I happen to really like Hillsdale College because I agree with you, but I'm thinking maybe Hillsdale College they do on the other end what our schools are doing, what we don't like. And so I'm curious about your philosophy.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't use the word philosophy for things like that, but I'll tell you what our principle is. First of all, so I give you 2 kinds of answers, and they seem to cut in different directions. The first is the purpose of a college is not diversity. It's truth. For example, if you say the sentence which the president of the University of Michigan is forever saying, I wrote her a letter about it once, if you say the sentence that the University of Michigan's purpose is diversity, the word university and diversity don't work together, right? It's stupid. But now how do you get to the truth? And the answer is our Constitution reader is on the internet. And you will discover, if you find it, that we believe that the Constitution of the United States is the greatest instrument of government ever written, and that there is about as much space devoted to the people who urged its rejection as those who urged its passage. The Anti-Federalist and the Federalist are both represented. Our college is a unionist college, abolitionist college. Nobody had a bigger part in the Civil War than we, and we read the Confederacy in our reader. And we think that progressivism is a terrible and dangerous thing, and we have a whole section of the reader just on that, original sources by the people who wrote it. We have 4 on-campus conferences a year, and they're on a topic. And we invite the best people we can find to debate that topic, not necessarily equally to represent the sides, because sometimes this one side is stupid and we don't feel, but we counted it up not long ago. We counted it up not long ago because we were asked a question. And as far as we could tell, over the last 3 or 4 years, there have been more Democrats speak at our on-campus conferences than Republicans. So remember, the worst, like for example, in a college, you have to have this rule to get anywhere. You never, I always say this to the freshmen, we are not here to agree to disagree. If we disagree, somebody's wrong. And this is the place where we get to the bottom of that point. So it is the scholar's point to conceal no significant fact against yourself. And we try to follow that procedure. Okay, one more and then we'll shut up. The man who looks like Mike Harner. who works in my office.
Dr. Arnn, my name is Jerry Sawyer. I'm from Fort Myers Beach. I was a student for 9 years, a professor of English for many more. You made the statement that the students tend to be more sensible than the professors. I agree with that.
Mine are.
Let me be the devil's advocate for just a moment.
Okay.
Since 1800, the philosophy has started out naturalism, distinguished between philosophy and politics. For years, the academy has been teaching naturalism. The climax was the election of Barack Obama. The character of America collapsed at that time as a result of this continued barrage. Here's my point. I think that with the election of Scott Brown a couple days ago in Massachusetts, we've won a temporary victory. But in the long run, I don't think it looks so good. I think that academia is carrying this, not just the United States, the world, with naturalism. The thing is all there is. And I don't think it looks so good. I'm being the devil's advocate. Respond, if you wish.
Well, okay, so I guess I'll respond this way. The gloomiest essay that I know of that Winston Churchill wrote is called Mass Effects on Modern Life. And it sounds a little bit like what you just said. It talks about how everything is so big now and everything is so organized and people are so comfortable and everything is provided for them in canned opinion and entertainment. And the corporate world is so uniform and the same, and it's so awful. And he says that this phenomenon finds its highest state of perfection, which doesn't mean it's different in kind, in Bolshevism, which he says would reduce human society not to the condition of the bee, because it won't be able to make any honey, to the condition of the white ant. That's very dark, right? And then he says, the next paragraph, and I can quote it pretty close, but human nature is more intractable than ant nature. The explosive variety and liberty it presents makes it an inchangeable fact that human beings are easy to lead and hard to drive. So what I think is, I think that what happened in Massachusetts is not a passing phenomenon. It is an explosion, not of naturalism, but of nature, the nature of man.